Okie dokes, okie dokes, okie dokes. Right, let's get to it, shall we, peeps? We need to get to it immediately. We need to immediately solve the puzzle. So what is going on here? We're going to talk about the long history of woke, and it's got a damn long history. It really goes back all the way. We're going to get into it, people. Let's go. So, woke, what does it mean? To me, you put your opinions below. It means basically it's a social revolution, but it's an imperative towards a social revolution. It's saying we are not where we want to be. We need to be here where we want to be. And in addition to that, it's all about this needs to happen now. The revolution must occur now. And last few years, it's been very different to the 90s or even the 80s. It's been like the laws are changing. It's like the laws are not where the politicians and the people necessarily want them to be. So they're changing every 5 minutes. Hence, rental crisis across the Western world. And people do blame the landlords, but the landlords are only operating within the system that allows them to operate. If they don't want to operate in that system, they won't do it. If it's too restrictive, they won't do it. So, so it's about social revolution. It's about the idea that instead of maintaining the existing hierarchy, it's more important to actually change it. And how do you change it? Blurring the boundaries. Every revolution, it's all about blurring the boundaries. So let's look at it from a historical perspective, since this is a history channel. So, firstly, what has driven it? It's being driven by invention. It's accelerated, I've noticed, with the invention of the internet, the invention of the smartphone, and invention pushes it forward. And this is probably why the whole leftism movement calls itself progressive, because they wouldn't be anything without invention. Without the invention of the factory town, they wouldn't ever have gotten together. They'd be a farmer on a field with some strange ideas, and people would look at them like they've got three heads. But with invention and the rise of invention, straight away you had people working 15 hours a day, children working 15 hours a day, children all day, that was fine. A few decades later, by the 1820s and 30s, they started saying, oh no, that's not, no. 12 hours a day, yeah, 12 hours a day, that's okay. By the 20th century, it was 8 hours a day. It's like, you can't do more than 8 hours of this. The entire 19th century, and you don't think of the Dickensian period as woke. The Dickensian period, and this is a key theme of the video, was extremely woke. The woke has a long history. It goes all the way back, because the 19th century was a passage from basically feudalism in 1800, basically feudalism, to middle class democracy in 1900. Massive revolution. If you look at all the legal changes that occurred throughout the 19th century, it was about removing the exploitation of workers. It was all about universal education. And it was also all about voting. There was a universal suffrage. It wasn't until the 20th century, but universal working man's suffrage, yeah. At the start in 1800 in Britain, only the largest property owners could vote for Parliament. Law after law after law, change after change after change occurred throughout the 19th century. These woke ideas permeated literature. And they said, okay, now the smaller landowners can vote. Eventually, all the working, by I think 1870s, all the working men can vote. So boom, suddenly you had the beginnings of the 20th century there in the 1870s, and things started to change. In addition to that, it was all about, in the 19th century, a lot of free trade. The free trade began. How did that begin? Now, I've made a video talking about how restrictive trade tariffs actually did build the British Empire. But once it was built, the British Empire had a big problem, because tariffs seem to have been a driving force of the American Revolution. The American Revolutionaries said, we're not going to be forced to trade with you and then pay these exorbitant tariffs, and you're treating us like a farm. And we don't have rights, the same rights that you have in Britain to make money, which is the pursuit of happiness. That's what they call making money, the pursuit of happiness. We don't have those rights. What's going on? Why don't we have those rights? So we'll have a revolution. Now, Britain may have been becoming more self-aware in the 19th century about this. So by the 1850s, they decided to free up trade. And that permeated into the 20th century and continued. And it became a religion. George Bush Jr. only a few years ago was talking about how tariffs are evil. There's something morally wrong with them. Well, it's an evil thing. It's a terrible thing. And if you look at it in this way, the free trade is a kind of part of the woke religion. How did it start? So in 1851, there was the Great Exhibition. Only Britain was industrial, not even Ireland, just Great Britain was industrial. No other country was industrial in 1851, but it spread to the continent, Holland and Germany by the 1870s. Why? Britain began to show off her products and machines. The Great Exhibition of 1851. Britain's basically said to the world, this is what we can do with our machines. You can do it too. Look what we're doing. You can have your own great exhibitions too. See what you can do. And so they all went and did that. And Britain found herself by the 1870s competing with America and Germany and other industrial powers, Japan as well, making the same products. Oh, that's a problem. Oh, okay. Before this, they had freed up trade. They thought, okay, they started thinking, okay, look, let's have a revolution against this tariffs, this protection. Let's free up trade. Why? Well, part of the reason was maybe let's hold on to the colonies. We don't want any further revolts and revolutions against our tariffs. In addition, because we're the manufacturing capital of the world, we're the world's workshop, a kind of position that China today occupies, who's going to compete with us anyway? Who's going to be able to compete with us? And for many decades, that proved to be true. When they lifted the tariff restrictions, they found that, oh, we're still able to compete. Ship owners and sailors said, we'll be out of business because they'll start using foreign ships. No. Britain had built up such momentum that after they freed up the trade for decades and decades and decades, people kept using the British Navy and the British ships and the British merchant fleet for their trade because they were so good. So the shipping actually increased because they were so skilled. So people started to think, oh, the free trade seems to be working. It seems to be good. It seems to be brilliant. And of course, over time, it becomes a mantra. It becomes a religion. The free trade, the democratic voting, the reduced factory hours, all evolved over the 19th century until it created a kind of middle-class utopia or something along those lines. It wasn't until the 20th century that I believe the free trade started breaking down. And we'll get into that in a second. A bit more on the 19th century for now. Charles Dickens and other literature. Les Miserables, all this literature of the 19th century, it is the most woke thing you've ever read. Charles Dickens, if you really boil it down what it's all about, it's about what is it about? He's grumbling. The entire, you reading and reading and reading, he's always satirizing and parodizing those he doesn't necessarily agree with in society because he worked in a factory as a child and he didn't like being bullied by all these people bigger than he was. So he always paints the factory owners as hypocrites. They're liars. They don't do what they preach. As buffoons, they're always dressed extravagantly, or they have a buffoonish method of conversation. They're always lecturing and parroting others, and they're buffoons. They're clowns, thus diminishing their social status. He's a revolutionary. We also had similar revolution in terms of Charles Darwin and evolution. The blurring, woke is all about the blurring of the lines. So if man is no longer the highest creature and we're the monkeys, or come from the monkeys, we're blurring the lines between the species. That's a revolution. Wow. A revolution in thinking as well. This is extraordinary. Charles Dickens, he's always grumbling. Now, what I would boil it all down to is the revolutions of the 1830s failed to establish a kind of communism throughout Europe. There were a lot of revolutions in the 1830s against the monarchies. The monarchies were trying to come back after Napoleon, but such was the prevalence of reading and newsprint and middle classism that they were unable to do so. They were unable to regain their absolute monarchy status throughout Europe, and these monarchies began to disintegrate, and certainly after World War I, they completed their disintegration, and the feudalism it wore off on the continent around the time of the 1870s, and everyone switched to middle class life, and all the middle class people suddenly they had with manufacturing, the fashion became an aristocratic fashion. So you look at the fashions of the 1900s, Paris fashions, European fashions, everyone is dressed not as middle class. They're dressed like aristocrats, everyone. Because suddenly with the manufacturing, the prices have come down in Europe for clothing. Europe is able to import cotton. Cotton doesn't, like this is wool, it can be thin, and in response to body heat, the fibers clamp down and shrink. Cotton and plant fibers don't do that. But suddenly they had this cheap cotton. I'm calling it the 19th century plastic. The cotton coming from America, they could make cheap clothes. Yeah, everyone can have clothes now. Everyone can have fancy clothes. This is incredible. This is a revolution in clothing. And suddenly we can all dress like an aristocrat. And this explains the fashion. Everyone was dressed aristocratically. There wasn't middle class fashion. That was aristocratic fashion. And that has continued until I'd say the year 2000, when it sort of all seems to have died out. And now it's a bit of, if you wear a suit, it looks like you're wearing a costume, because people are no longer trying to get back into that aristocratic world by dressing up anymore. And now they have a social media account, that's their face. Their face is no longer what they're wearing. Letters of introduction, introductory cards like in Sherlock Holmes, please introduce me to the host. That sort of thing doesn't exist so much anymore. Where are we? So the writing. So we've gone through the whole 19th century. We've explained all this revolution, the wokeism, and the universal voting. It became a middle class world because they wanted to blur the lines, and the lines started blurring automatically. We won't get into libertarianism and if capitalism assisted with this or not. We're not going to get into that because we don't talk politics. So let's step back. Let's go back to the Middle Ages. The Middle Ages was a very... we don't have the peasant voice, so we don't know much about whether they were woke or not, but it seems the ideas were always there. It's just they had no progress to be able to express themselves. The Byzantine Empire and the late Roman Empire were based on the woke ideas of emperors that we need to over-regulate everything. We need to trample on everyone's rights because the people don't know what they want, with over-regulation. And we're in charge, we know what they want. If we give them too many rights, they'll start civil wars anyway, and we don't want that. The thing is, they had civil wars anyway, even with all these regulations and excessive taxations, and people just defected. Nobles defected to the Germans. In the East, the Roman nobles defected to the Turks. The Turks said, we'll halve your taxes. Join us, and we'll continue your Roman culture. The Seljuks of Rome is what they call themselves. We'll continue your culture, it's fine. And you'll have religious freedom. The Ottomans said, you'll have religious freedom. You can be Christians, that's okay. And the people said, all right, well, sounds a bit better than what we've got now. We don't have to pay as much taxes to Constantinople. Yeah, let's do it. Late Rome was run like a socialist regime, and people didn't necessarily like it. The printing press blurred the lines. The Slav word for God is the Germanic word for book. Why is that? Because the book was the God. They saw a book. Oh, that's God. That book is God. That book is holy. Swear on the Bible. That's God. as soon as the printing press arrived, Protestantism appeared. People said, hang on a sec, this pagan mass, and it is a pagan mass with the cups, is different to what it says in the Bible. I'm not seeing the priests. I'm not seeing the colourful uniforms. That's Druidism. I'm not seeing the grails in there. I'm not seeing any of this. I'm just seeing Jesus leading a few men around the Holy Land. I'm not seeing anything about church Gothic architecture in here. What have we been doing to ourselves? And these Protestants began to take over, and it switched into a political movement. There were people being converted all the time. And you had endless war in Europe over this for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, just because of the printing press. They wanted to blur the lines and change it all around. Just incredible. That was a type of woke based on religion. Let's get into the 20th century. Now, the 20th century, I believe the free trade religion started to show cracks. It started to break up. It started to discombobulate. It started to fall apart, because we've noticed since the 90s the rise of Asia. We've noticed that we have facilitated manufacturing in Asian countries at the expense of the Western countries. And this has been a bit of an issue, because we've noticed, especially in the last few years, a massive decline in the standards of living, but a rise in the standards of living in Asia. Now, this was planned. This was planned due to woke policies in the 20th century. And we've seen that it does, these woke policies, you can enact them. Things will be fine for decades. You won't notice a change. But maybe 50, 100 years down the track, you will notice a tremendous change over time. So what happened is this. Apparently in 71, there's been a decoupling of productivity from wages. Wages haven't matched increasing productivity. Why? What's going on? We can't afford things anymore. Well, one, there's too many bureaucrats, especially here in places like countries like this. There's a lot of bureaucrats. If you want to do anything, you need an endless amount of permits, and you need to pay an endless amount of money to the permits, and the builders are paying their own permits and permits and permits and permits and permits and permits. And this has accelerated in recent years. It's really, even local governments, a local government in Australia before about 2005 was not considered a wing of government. Now it is. It's its own government. Local governments are a government. So we have government upon state government, federal government, income tax, state government, property tax, local government, property tax. It's all government, tax, regulatory authorities over certain occupations, more government. University is another government over occupations. You need a 3-year degree. Diploma's not enough. Government. There's too much of it, and it's accelerated. Now, what happened? In the 60s, Australia, women were not allowed into pubs. Women were not allowed on a mortgage. The man went out in the daytime, he worked, he came back, and all his money was being paid into the family. You allow women into occupations, you allow women to buy property, and they're on the mortgage. What's going to happen? You've doubled the amount of workers. Okay. So you've halved the wages. It gets worse. Bretton Woods, we got off the gold standard. This allows the government freedom to print money at will. So all this has done is increase the power of government. And then we have another thing, the Lima Agreement, 75-77. Australia was a signatory. The Lima Agreement was some kind of United Nations WTO directive aimed at increasing manufacturing in developing countries to help develop them, to blur the lines between the developed world and the Western world. How has this benefited the Western world? I don't know if it has or it hasn't, but we have shifted manufacturing away. If you look at old Australia, look at Melbourne, look at the inner suburbs, the working suburbs, It's all red brick factories. We used to manufacture everything literally in the city. It was factories and factories and factories. Cigarettes and cigars were manufactured. Every company, everything in Australia was manufactured here in Australia. It was the same with America, the same with UK. It was the same thing. Now everything is literally manufactured overseas. And you want to run a factory here, it's not going to happen. It's just pointless. So government too has stepped into the woke revolution by assuming powers to make us even more woke, and that means to blow the lines even more to continue this social revolution to the present day. So this isn't something that's popped up in the last few years. It's been going since, I'd say, at least the 1830s revolutions is when it really started. That's when it really kicked off. And then looking back through history, different types of woke. There was the religious woke of the late Romans and big government. And of course, the book revolution enabled the Protestantism. So there's a lengthy discussion, people. I hope I didn't bore you to death. There we go. All right. That better have recorded. We'll see if that recorded. We'll see.